I've already made the decision to arrest Jesus.
I think you have to ask yourself, well, why is he mad? Yeah. And what is he mad about? Who are people that are supposed to be models of God's law and rule? The Pharisees, like the priests.
26 years before this, in actuality, there was a revolt, and the Romans killed 3,000 Jews, crucified them, according to Josephus, the historian of the time. Caiaphas's whole determination is this never happens
Have you ever
again.
wondered what happened to Caiaphas, the high priest who stood face to face with Jesus? What if we viewed his story through the lens of The Chosen, the groundbreaking series that has touched millions? Today, we'll explore the chilling end of Caiaphas, but also how The Chosen and Jonatham Roumie's portrayal of Jesus brings fresh emotional insight into this pivotal moment.
May I help you? We were just on a walk and we heard voices, and I thought they sounded like... But surely not. And yet it is you.
Would you like to come in?
We would never be caught dead in a...
In a what? In a tax collector's house?
Not only that, but with a...
26 years before this, in actuality, there was a revolt, and the Romans killed 3,000 Jews, crucified them, according to Josephus, the historian of the time. Caiaphas's whole determination is this never happened.
Caiaphas, the high priest who stood face to face with the Son of God, accused him of blasphemy and pushed for his crucifixion, disappears completely from Scripture after that moment. But history didn't forget him. He helped condemn Jesus to death. But what happened to him? What drove this man to such a choice? And how did his story end? Today, we're looking at the chilling truth about the horrible death of Caiaphas, and it's not what you'd expect. Before we go deeper, let's pause and hear what Jonatham Roumie, who plays Jesus in The Chosen, has said about this pivotal confrontation. They were supposed to be the spiritual leaders of Israel, guardians of the law, teachers of truth. But to Jesus, the Pharisees and their allies, including the high priest Caiaphas, were something far more sinister.
Changes with the Pharisees. I'm reading Matthew right now. I'm really struck this time by the intensity of his rage at the Pharisees. Like, he doesn't...
While Jesus showed compassion to pagans, soldiers, and sinners, his fury burned against the religious elite. Why?
I think you have to ask yourself, well, why is he mad?
Yeah.
And what is he mad about? And who are the Pharisees to him? And I think it goes back to what I was referencing in that here you have who are people that are supposed to be models of God's law and rule and grace. The Pharisees, like the priests, the people look up to for spiritual advice and wisdom and guidance.
Because these men, including Caiaphas, were not shepherds. They were wolves in holy robes, robbing the poor, exploiting the weak, worshiping the letter of the law while abandoning its heart. Mercy, justice, compassion.
And because Jesus can read souls and know what's in their hearts, he sees they're probably the worst of them. And he knows that they have ill will towards him, and they don't have the interests of the people in their hearts because they're so enraptured by the letters of the law. As he said, you're so concerned about the letter of the law that you're not even considered about the heart of the law, which is, God's mercy and justice. And how are these people, how are you treated?
Imagine the rage of heaven itself. Focus on a system that claimed to serve God, but only served itself. On Passover, the poorest of the poor would come with their offerings, sacrifices made out of their poverty and pain. But what did they find?
These people, the fact that they would go every year on Passover, the poorest of the poor, trying to bring their offerings and sacrifices that through extortion were getting charged 500%, probably more than what they should have. I don't know the exact numbers, but the point was that they were being extorted every step of the way.
Caiaphas and his fellow priests had turned the holy temple into a marketplace of corruption, a den of thieves.
By their own leaders, these Pharisees. And that for him was the straw that broke the camel's back. And the next day he's clearing the temple. He's
flipping the tables over.
Flipping tables, whipping, using a whip to clear money changers' stands and just outraged. God's righteous anger.
Yeah, it's not the gentle Jesus at all.
No.
It was the moment that sealed Jesus' fate. A direct confrontation, righteous fire against rotten power. And Caiaphas, the high priest who presided over the sham trial of the Son of God, he wasn't just a political operator. He was a Sadducee, a man who didn't even believe in the resurrection, in angels, in the spiritual world. And yet he played God. The man who tore his robe in mock outrage at Jesus' claim to be the Messiah would later die not as a martyr, but as a broken priest of a broken system. History remembers him not as holy, but as hollow, as the one who sacrificed the Lamb of God, not out of faith but fear.
Knows, number one, he has to make an impression, and he is vindicated through his actions because of who they are, who the Pharisees truly are deep down inside. But also that this will then continue the chain of events that have been set into motion that will put him on the cross so that he can redeem mankind.
It seems like all of his anger is reserved.
Jesus knew it. He knew they would kill him. And still, he flipped the tables. Now, coming back.
They had power and they loved it. That's why Jesus said, don't be like the Pharisees. Don't be hypocrites. Don't have all these long phylacteries and pray in public places, because to them they loved the praise of men. They loved the power. They loved the praise. They loved all the glory. And so they wanted to eliminate him because they feared that he was going to take over them, what they had. Because the people wanted him to be king. He had come down on the triumphal entry. Great crowd before and after him, wanting to make him king.
Caiaphas, also known as Joseph ben Caiaphas, served as the Jewish high priest from AD 18 to 36, having been appointed by the Roman governor Valerius Gratus. A member of the Sadducees, Caiaphas supported collaboration with Roman authorities and dismissed certain beliefs of the Pharisees, including the resurrection of the dead. Although details about his early life are sketchy, it is believed he was born around 14 BC into a prominent and affluent family. His father-in-law, Annas, held the position of high priest from AD 6 to 15 and continued to wield significant influence within the Jewish leadership.
History tells us that he was the son-in-law of Annas and likely from the tribe of Levi. As a member of the Jewish priestly class, he was a part of the sect of the Sadducees. Now, the Sadducees had priestly but also political and judicial roles. The other main religious group was the Pharisees, and they focused more on religious laws and teaching in local synagogues. Now, the Sadducees tended to be corrupted by money, and they were more interested in the political power and benefits from their close ties with the Romans.
As the head of the Sanhedrin, the Jewish Supreme Council composed of 71 members, including chief priests, elders, and scribes, Caiaphas held considerable power amongst them. This council was responsible for adjudicating civil and religious issues, although it lacked the authority to carry out executions without the Roman governor's consent.
Protecting his own power and preserving public order were now his highest priorities, and Caiaphas knew that Jesus must die.
Though Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin conspired to eliminate Jesus, they were uncertain about the potential backlash this could trigger from his followers. So they sought a covert method to arrest him and fabricate charges. Their chance came when Judas Iscariot, one of Jesus' disciples, agreed to betray his master for 30 pieces of silver. And this was really prearranged by the high priest's actions. For instance, here's how Jonatham Roumie puts it.
The church establishment, the temple establishment of his time. So seeing religious leaders basically subvert the meaning behind and the practices of his faith at the time and extort the poorest of the poor during the holidays, when they all had to bring their sacrifices to be slain for Passover. They were getting, you have to pay taxes, and then you have to pay Roman tax, and then there's a conversion tax, and there's all of these bills, excuse me, fines that were levied essentially just to be able to practice your faith. And among very many other things, that was the last straw for him.
Caiaphas' sole duty was to cater for the needs of the temple and perform the obligations of his office as the high priest. How hard can that be?
Yeah, so being the perfect, sinless Son of God, Jesus didn't experience the kinds of anger to the fault of sinfulness that we as humans do, right? So, what does that mean? Well, you have to consider what is generating the anger. And in this case, it was essentially the desecration of the temple by the people who are supposed to uphold as models of righteousness and faithfulness to God, the Father.
Rather than cleanse the temple and dissuade the money traders in the temple, Caiaphas went to liaise with the Sanhedrin on how to get an innocent man killed. And unfortunately, Jesus' own disciple became instrumental to this. After receiving the payment, Judas looked for a moment to hand Jesus over without attracting a crowd. During the Last Supper, Jesus foretold that one of his disciples would betray him, identifying Judas by offering him a piece of bread dipped in wine. He urged Judas to act swiftly, which prompted Judas to leave the gathering to a prearranged place with the armed soldiers and officers of the Sanhedrin.
Terrified at the idea. 26 years before this, in actuality, there was a revolt, and the Romans killed 3,000 Jews, crucified them, according to Josephus, the historian of the time. Caiaphas's whole determination is this never happened.
Then, Caiaphas incited an angry mob against Jesus, perceiving him as a danger to both the Jewish religious authority and the Roman rule. He was apprehensive that Jesus' growing popularity and his claims of being the Messiah could spark a revolt, provoking severe repercussions from Rome. Additionally, Caiaphas saw Jesus as a blasphemer deserving of death under Jewish law. He skillfully swayed the crowd to demand Jesus' crucifixion and pressured Pilate to comply with his demands. Following Judas' kiss, soldiers and officers seized Jesus and bound him. In an attempt to defend Jesus, Peter proceeded to cut off the ear of Malchus, a servant of the high priest. However, Jesus admonished Peter to sheath his sword and miraculously healed the injury. He then questioned the authorities about their approach, asking why they treated him like a criminal when he had been teaching openly in the temple every day. He indicated that this event was also a fulfillment of the scriptures that predicted his suffering. Abandoning him, the disciples fled. Jesus was taken to the residence of Annas, Caiaphas' father-in-law, where he was interrogated about his disciples and teachings. Jesus responded that he had spoken openly to everyone and suggested they ask those who had heard him for clarification. An officer struck Jesus for addressing the high priest in a manner he deemed inappropriate, but Jesus challenged him to explain what he had said that was wrong. Annas subsequently sent Jesus to Caiaphas, where some members of the Sanhedrin had assembled for the initial trial. Caiaphas and the council sought to find false witnesses against Jesus, but their efforts were in vain as they could not agree on their testimonies. Eventually, 2 witnesses emerged, claiming that Jesus had asserted he could destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days. This misrepresented Jesus' earlier statement, where he referred to his own body as the temple that would be resurrected after his death. John 2 verses 19 to 22. Caiaphas then inquired if Jesus wished to defend himself, but Jesus chose to remain silent. The high priest then placed Jesus under oath and directly asked, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of God?" This question was crucial for Caiaphas, as an affirmation of Jesus' messianic and divine identity would constitute blasphemy, punishable by death under Jewish law. Jesus replied, "You have said so, but I tell you all, from now on, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." This response alluded to Old Testament prophecies found in Daniel 7 verses 13 to 14 and Psalm 110 verse 1, which foretold the Messiah's exaltation and authority as both the Son of Man and the Son of God.
In a previous debate with the Jewish leaders, Jesus claimed to have seen Abraham. Abraham, who was considered to be the father of the Hebrew people from nearly 2,000 years earlier. Now, when they challenged Jesus, he replied to them, "Before Abraham was, I am," John 8:58. Now, this reference to "I am" in the Hebrew language was specifically reserved for God himself, and it was therefore considered to be the ultimate blasphemy. Simply uttering the words prompted the Jewish leaders to attempt to stone Jesus, but he escaped.
In reaction, Caiaphas tore his garments in a display of anger and sorrow, declaring that Jesus had committed blasphemy and that no further witnesses were necessary. He asked the council for their opinion, and they unanimously agreed that Jesus deserved to die. They then spat on him, struck him, and mocked him, saying, "Prophesy to us, Messiah. Who hit you?" The trial of Jesus before the Sanhedrin was neither a standard nor a lawful process. It was a secretive and rushed assembly of a few council members intent on eliminating Jesus. Jewish law stipulates that capital trials must not occur at night, on the eve of a Sabbath or festival, or without a proper defense and a complete panel of 71 judges. The trial of Jesus contravened all these regulations, taking place before dawn on Passover night, lacking legal representation or witnesses for Jesus, and featuring only a partial and biased Sanhedrin. Initially, Caiaphas aimed to keep the Romans out of Jesus' trial to maintain the Sanhedrin's autonomy and authority over religious issues. He sought to avoid any public disturbance or Roman repercussions that could arise from a trial involving a popular preacher like Jesus. His goal was to find a way to condemn Jesus for blasphemy, a capital offense under Jewish law, without requiring the Roman governor's consent. However, since Caiaphas lacked the authority to execute Jesus without the Roman governor's approval, they brought him before Pontius Pilate, accusing him of claiming to be the king of the Jews, a charge that amounted to treason against Rome. Jesus' trial before the Roman authorities was characterized by humiliation, torture, and ridicule. Initially presented to Pilate, who found no reason to condemn him, Jesus was sent to Herod Antipas, the Galilean ruler present in Jerusalem. Herod was eager to see Jesus, but he received no answers to his inquiries. Herod and his soldiers mocked and mistreated Jesus before returning him to Pilate. Although Pilate sought to free Jesus, the crowd demanded his crucifixion. Consequently, Pilate ordered Jesus to be flogged, and the soldiers fashioned a crown of thorns, placing it on his head. They dressed him in a purple robe and derided him as the king of the Jews. Pilate then presented Jesus to the crowd, declaring, "Behold the man!" But they responded with shouts of "Crucify him!" Ultimately, Pilate washed his hands of the matter and surrendered Jesus to be crucified. The exact date of Jesus' crucifixion remains a topic of scholarly debate, but the most commonly accepted date is Friday, April 3rd, AD 33. This estimation is derived from various factors, including astronomical calculations of the Jewish lunar calendar, historical records of Roman governors and emperors, biblical references related to Passover and the Sabbath, and the prophetic implications surrounding these events. Today's Christians all over the world chose to remember this significant event via Easter, remarking on the death and resurrection of Christ. It is usually held around that same period believed to be Christ's death. Now, to answer one of the most thoughtful questions ever asked about what happened to Caiaphas after Jesus died and resurrected. According to historical and biblical sources, Caiaphas continued to serve as the high priest for a few more years after Jesus' resurrection. He had ordered the soldiers to lie about Jesus' resurrection to keep this truth away from the Jews and the rest of the world. Caiaphas was also involved in the persecution of the early Christians, and he presided over the trial of Stephen, the first Christian martyr. He was also present at the trial of Peter and John, who were arrested for preaching the resurrection of Jesus. Caiaphas was eventually deposed from his office in AD 36 by the Roman governor Vitellius, who appointed Jonatham, the son of Ananus, as the new high priest. The fate of Caiaphas after his deposition is uncertain, but some traditions suggest that he committed suicide, was killed by a mob, or died in exile.
We are in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. This is one of the most fantastic finds of all time when it comes to biblical archaeology. This is the burial box of Caiaphas, the high priest who sentenced Jesus to die. You can see how ornate it is. And on the side of this box, it identifies the remains as the remains of Joseph, son of Caiaphas. There's only one Caiaphas known from history in the first century, the man that sentenced Jesus to die. Inside this box, which was found in 1990, were the remains of a 60-year-old man, his bones, and his family. This is incredible when you think about the man who sentenced Jesus to die. His remains were right here.
I hope you enjoyed today's video. If so, kindly drop your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done so already.